All right, here I got a 96, which is also like a 96 to 2004 Blazer four-wheel drive. Has the 4.3 V6 in it, and I need to drop my oil pan. So this thing has a crack in the oil pan where the motor mounts are bad. Then the oil pan got a crack in it. So I pulled out the front axle, which is right there. This suspension, you can see the suspension is still complete. We didn't have to pull the motor. We did pull the steering rod out. So the complete steering assembly is out. I'm going to go up underneath here, show you guys what I did underneath. Okay, so this is how your axles are connected. Just a plate with about a little less than a 1/4 inch recess. And so here's the other one. Now on this side we did do the upper ball joint. So that ball joint allowed this axle to flop out, giving us space for the drive shaft to move over this way. Now one thing we did have to modify, this bracket right here should have a bracket shaped like this. And then the bolt goes through here, and so I just cut that bracket off, and we'll re-weld that on later. Not a big deal, because once the bolt goes in place, then this piece of metal that was here will now line right up, and then we'll re-weld that back in place. This is the transfer cases drive shaft that goes to the front. We had to unattach that. That's just 4 bolts on a U-joint. The steering rod, which did connect your outer tie rod to this is your pitman arm. This is your idler arm. So it's going to take some force getting it off of these bolts right here. So those took a lot of hammering to break those free. And then you have your, of course, inner tie rod on the passenger side. But this whole steering bar had to come out to clear this transfer case. But now we have full access to the oil pan. The oil pan has like 5 bolts on either side. And so here's the driver's side. Now the driver's side, you'll have this oil remote kit, I guess you could say. It has just 2 bolts. They're probably like a 13, 14 mil. And then that'll come out of the way, allowing you to get at this first bolt. And then you have 5 bolts. For some reason, I noticed the first bolt on this side, there's no bolt in the oil pan, which is odd. But yeah, I had a nice hole right here. I just threw on some silicone yesterday. I was going to attempt to do temp patch, and then I bought a brand new one online. So I got it for like 50 bucks on Amazon, just an open box item. But this oil pan's about 130 bucks, and everyone's like, you gotta drop the motor. So I am not dropping the engine. I didn't even raise the engine. The engine's exactly where it should be on these stock motor mounts. Although I am going to replace those, because I think that these motor mounts being worn out was why this oil pan slammed down, hitting the axle, which punched and kind of made like an egg, cracked this oil pan. So the other things you got to do in this oil pan, you're going to have these 2 big grommets right here. You have to rip these out, and these 2, this one and this one here, this is going to allow you access to use a long extension. You know, it's going to be the same bolt size that all of the oil pan bolts are. If they're 14 or 15, I think they're probably 13 or 14 mil bolts. Anyways, so you're going to use a long extension that goes all the way up to the bottom of this oil pan. Then you should have 3 on the back of the transmission. 1, 2, and there's a 3rd one right over here on the back of the transmission, the bell housing, I guess. So this bell housing has just, I think it's just those 3 bolts. Might be a 4th one up there. Trying to figure out if this 4th one way up on the driver's side goes into the oil pan or not. It looks like it might. Whatever, that's just one more bolt to come out. So you got a few bolts between the bell housing of the transmission to the oil pan, and you have these 2 really deep ones. Can't forget about these bad boys. Without these, this oil pan will not come off. And that's really it. So it took quite a few hours to get this whole drive shaft, that front drive shaft right there, out. But, you know, not too bad of a job. The main thing is you will have to cut this bracket off if you don't want to pull the whole engine. But, you know, putting this stupid little L bracket back on, here it is. So this little piece of metal used to be like that. It's going to line a stupid hole up. But yeah, so cut that little bracket off right there, and this is what the transmission was held onto. Transmission was bolted here. I also cut off these 2 little tabs there was nothing here and they just stuck out. Those were kind of in the way, so I cut that little bracket off. And it was also mounted to this plate here with 2 bolts. So here's one of them. Anyway, so you have to have these are 18 mil way up here in this top. So these, you have to have a wrench way up from the top here, holding these in place. So yeah, but that's mostly it. If you want to change an oil pan on a 96 to 2004 Blazer 4x4, this is only for the 4x4s. They have this crazy aluminum heavy-duty oil pan because this thing goes around the front axle goes right here. So because of that, this oil pan's completely shaped different. And then you have this remote oil filter kit. So your oil filter's way up under the front bumper, right under the front end. So that's why this is relocated, because the transfer case, part of the U-joint and whatnot, would be right here where a normal filter would be on the other 4.3s. So hope that helps out. Make this job a lot easier than pulling the damn engine. All right, guys.